Hi, I'd like to thank everyone from the Fast Pitch Zone and especially the owner of the Fast Pitch Zone, Dave McCracken. And specifically, we've got a couple of the moderators here helping us out. First, we have Jessie Rosenhaun. Jessie's from Buffalo, New York, and she owns Buffalo Elite Sports Training. Jessie's in the West New York Hall of Fame. She was a pitcher and a catcher. Right now, her duties are training pitcher instructors all around the United States. Crystal's also the moderator. Crystal was born in Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma. She's now in Clayton, North Carolina. Crystal was a Marine. I guess is a Marine. She's 2 years active, 4 in the reserve. Her husband is retired Army Sergeant. And as you'll find out later on, there's a lot of military connections to the king and his court. And Crystal, we'd specifically like you for herding cats here, the five of us, the 5 members here from the king and his court. So without further ado, we're going to get started. My name is Jim Droskinis, and my connection to this group is last year during COVID, Rich Hoppy and I have known each other for quite a while, and we wrote a book called Tales of the Last Barnstormer, Rich Hoppy. And Rich played for about 20 years with the king. So I was honored to be able to tell his story. Myself, I'm a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. I served in 3 combat zones, and I played in softball most about everywhere I was in the United States and overseas. So I played about 40 years of ball. So like a lot of you in the Fast Pitch Zone, yes, I'm also a softball junkie. I have one unique story. I'm probably the only softball junkie among you who caught Rich Hoppy and pitched to Dave Booth, 2 members of the king and his court. So what I would like you to do is sit back and enjoy, and I guarantee you that you'll laugh, maybe cry a little bit, but you will learn a few things that you never dreamed of. And now I'd like to introduce our 5 players from the king and his court. Leading off, I got batting first. Unlike his usual 4 cleanup position, Dave Booth from Lemoyne, PA. Dave toured with the king for over a decade, and he caught for both Eddie Feiner and Rich Hoppy. Speaking of military, Dave was stationed in Hawaii when he was in the Army playing, is how Eddie Feiner picked up Dave Booth. Batting second, we got Coach Charlie Dobbins. Charlie owns he's the head coach of William Peace University, and he owns Grand Slam. Grand Slam is in Raleigh. It's a training facility for both softball, baseball, and basketball. Charlie played with the king in his court for about a dozen years, and he also played with the King of Diamonds. Coach Dobbins was inducted into the North Carolina Softball Hall of Fame in 2019. He served on NCAA Division III National Softball Committee for 6 years. Batting fourth, Ron Davenport, probably the youngest member of the king in his court. Ron hails from Glen Allen, Virginia, with his wife and 3 young girls. Ron's a high school teacher. Ron was drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays right out of high school instead of going to Florida State, and he played almost 10 years, mostly with the Brewers, a year with the Pirates, and a little bit with the team called the Long Island Ducks. Ron played about 2 years with the king in his court, and he got to play with Rich Hoppy. Dave's interesting story he'll tell you is Dave hit the last home run of the closeout game in Walla Walla, Washington. Batting fifth, we've got Bob Hale. And Bob, I hope I say your name of your hometown right. Antigonish, Nova Scotia, is that right?
Pretty close, Antigonish.
Antigonish, thank you.
Bye.
Sorry for all you Canadians, eh? Bob played the game of fast pitch since age 11, like a lot of us, over 40 years. And Bob took up pitching after 13 years after seeing Eddie Feiner pitch in Nova Scotia. Bob also promoted and toured with the king right around Y2K, the turn of the century. Bob's also a member of the Softball Nova Scotia Board of Directors for over 6 years, and he was a level 3 umpire softball in Nova Scotia for over a decade. We got Les Barber from Hamilton, Ontario. Les,
Yeah.
this is our senior citizen. In 1974 and 76. And Les has got 3 children, 4 grandkids, but Les is still working. He's the vice president of an organization called Horse State Holdings. And Les played with King Eddie Feiner when he was still more or less in his prime. He was getting up there, but you'll hear some interesting stories from Les. Just sit back and enjoy these stories. And we're gonna start with Dave. I understand your parole officer left you off for an hour or so to speak with us, so if you wouldn't mind back first here.
Okay, I have a little paragraph here. It's a summarized glimpse of life on the road and why we are all here on this Zoomcast. Cruising down the road in the van back in the old days with the king of softball, Eddie Feiner, barking orders from the back seat is a precious memory for me, and I would imagine a few others as well. Life on the road was a life in the van. These were the best of times for many reasons. Singing songs, telling jokes, sightseeing, and the king's serious lessons were all a part of the miles and the hours. Entertainment in the van was at a premium. Rolling down the road was anything but boring. We did have our share of silent, somber rides where everybody kept to themselves and the whining of the tires was the sweetest sound on earth. These were super special times and super special memories of a spectacular era that has long since ran its course and is now part of softball history. A simple softball in the hands of a special man was the key to the whole world for the great Eddie Feiner and his compact group. That softball would open doors and present opportunities that the United Nations could not provide. All of this was predicated on the simple fact that Eddie was required to take his show to the people. Driving a van was the only possible way to get the job done, and that was the beauty of life on the road and why I refer to riding in the van all those hours as Eddie Feiner University, the most advanced learning school on the planet. The professor was the toughest of the tough, and his graduates are better people today because of it. And I share this Zoomcast with a few of my fellow graduates.
Thanks, Dave.
Well spoken, Dave.
Thank you.
I think
Yeah.
it'd be appropriate to mention, if you don't mind, Les, the king in his court is 4-man softball. The original guys were Eddie, Meade Kinzer, Kenny White, and Mike Melicky. They picked up a 5th guy, Jerry Jones, not the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones. This was back in 1949. Les, you want to tell a few Eddie stories or catch us up to date?
Certainly. Thanks, guys. And good to hear from Dave about the road. You got that down pat. Perfect. And to meet those guys was a great experience for me. We played one night in Walla Walla, Washington in the 70s, and it was a homecoming for Eddie. And some of the guys came to the game, which was cool. Jerry Jones, Kenny White, and Meade Kinzer. And I met Mike Meilicke in Saskatoon one year. So that was a real thrill for me. And, we put on a good show. Everybody kind of compares you to the original crew. But, we held our own, put on a show, and kind of celebrated where Eddie's roots were, where he was an orphan and where he thrived with his adopted family and came on to be a legend. And so those were great days. When we met Mike Meilicke, by the way, I wanted to mention, guys, that every guy on that team could pitch and play anywhere. And they could all hit for average, hit for power, and they were very fast. So Eddie kind of excelled in the pitching and led the show eventually, but the originals all did a bit of pitching. So just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, that was a great experience to meet those guys and see where their roots came from. Always imagine that first game against the prison in Oregon. and they waxed them guys pretty good.
Just like the king in his court, you know, when something happens during the ball game, you just roll with it. So, Mike, we're already recording. Would you mind introducing yourself, and we'll pick up where we'll roll right with it.
Absolutely. Well, Mike Branchaud, member of the court back from, joined in 93, full-time 94 to 98, and played a whole bunch of games up until the final tour. So great memories, great to be here, great to see some familiar faces.
Charlie, you played a bunch of years, and you and Ron played the last game with
Mike also.
It's, in fact, we just missed the 10-year anniversary. 27 August of 21 was your 10-year anniversary. I know you were trying to do some 10-year events, but let's count this as one of them.
Okay, absolutely. No, I basically started booking for Eddie when I moved to North Carolina in probably 95 or so. I had the opportunity to play against him when I still lived in Connecticut when he'd come through. Matter of fact, I have a good Dave Booth story that we can talk about in a little while like that. That was pretty fun like that. But and mostly just booking them and just helping them along. And as they were in the North Carolina area, I'd jump in and just participate too. That's when Mike would come through. Mike was with him then. Eddie O'Coin part of the time there, and just kind of stayed in touch. I mean, I think what I'm mostly proud of is able to take Eddie's name and, basically I was the first one to get him the website, thekingofhiscourt.com, and that part of there. And that's what we use a lot with the social media to help book those later games and kind of reintroducing to folks that knew him, but also to a younger crowd as the game has now shifted more to the women's side. It was, obviously the last 2 years, that last year when we went out, the quote last 100 games of the King in His Court, we got to pretty much hit almost every corner of the country as we did our travels. And I think we did a great job of representing him, and also basically sent, when we closed it down, I think, Rich pretty much said it the best, it's like, all right, we're turning the lights out and hanging the keys on the fence to the van, and good night. But it was appropriate how we did it those last two games in Wenatchee and then also in Walla Walla.
And Charlie mentioned Rich, and that's Rich Hoppy, who played over 2 decades with the King and closed out, as Charlie mentioned, the last game. If you don't mind, I'm going to kick it down to Bob. Bob, you had a unique experience playing with the King in His Court. You want to tell the fans a little bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. And I was just going to say something to keep in mind. Eddie probably didn't have a website till 1997 or maybe 98. And he did everything from his home through telephone calls and flyers and letters for so many years. Imagine if he had the internet. Yeah, it's just amazing. So that's how I got hooked up with the King in His Court, was through the website. And he offered a fantasy camp. And I'd always wanted to do one with the Yankees. And when I saw this, it's like, frig that, this is where I'm going. And I signed up, and the first person I meet is Charlie in Dayton, Ohio, standing holding up a jersey with my name on it. And I go out to this van, and there's Mike sitting there, and then it just rolled from there. And Eddie and I became friends, and he said, you've earned your right. And for probably 8 years, I went out every summer with him to play some games, and it was just amazing. So, Charlie really started it for me, and to be able to connect with these guys. I mean, you don't see them, you don't talk to them a whole lot, but when you do, it's just like it was the first time you saw them or the first time you talked to them. And I think that's what's so special about the court is it's a family. Whether you play 10 games or 10,000 games, you're part of it because you're part of something special. And, over the years, there wasn't that many players when you really look at it that did it on a regular basis. So I'm proud to be part of, as I call it up here in Canada, Americana. And yeah, Americana, it's something special. And I
Well,
remember we were in Indianapolis, and Mike and Rich said to me, "You get it, Bob. You get it." And that stuck with me right through till today. Just the importance of the court and what it meant to be out there, and how important it was to them. So, yeah.
well, your experience was unique, Bob, but we've got another unique story here, Ron. You're probably one of the few players who played with the court who actually was a professional baseball player. You want to tell the fans a little bit about your experience adjusting and what that came?
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said earlier, drafted out of high school. I had signed with Florida State, but Blue Jays signed me and ended up playing 7 years with them, Brewers and Pirates. And, I, from Raleigh, North Carolina, I knew Charlie, him and Gene and Charlie's wife, Lisa, owners of the Grand Slam. So I had always trained there in the off seasons, and they were just wide open, just use it however I needed to. And so I had that relationship with Charlie, and it was probably, I guess, 07, 08, and Charlie and the court were still, plugging along with Hoppy, running everything. And but he said, whenever you get done playing, I'd like to, possibly join us for a couple of games when we're in town or close by and stuff like that. And I think a little bit of it, sure, because I had the memories of my dad. My dad actually played against the court in Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And story has it, as most stories from every small town had, I got that hit. Well, he did not. He struck out twice. But he tells a story about that his team, Army team, was pretty strong, had a very strong pitcher, and they actually were able to win a game against King in his court. And I had to verify it on multiple sources because I didn't believe it very much. But the court got the first three guys on base, and they just knew they were going to take care of the game pretty easily. Walked off the bases right before the pitch was thrown, so automatic triple play. And the bottom of the first, just so happened the Army team got a couple of runs, and then their pitcher was able to shut them down the rest of the game. That's the story anyway, and it's a good story. But so I got done playing and with the Long Island Ducks from the last team, and then Charlie invited me to a game up in Pennsylvania, actually. My first game, Dave was there, Russ Fitchie, and Hoppy and Charlie and myself. And real neat experience, loved it. Just kind of wide open, eye-opening. I was kind of on the side, hey, join in when you can, type of thing, just filling myself out, and end up hitting a couple of home runs. And Hoppy said, yeah, we'll have you back whenever you're ready. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. And that was my introduction to the court. Probably played maybe 15 games that year. And then the final year was the last 100 games. And so probably got whatever we end up getting through that season.
Yeah, interesting. We've got 3 of the 4 players who played in that final game in Walla Walla right here on this broadcast, right?
Yeah.
Being Charlie, Ron, and Mike. And the 4th.
Amazing, guys.
What's that?
Something to be proud of, playing that last game.
Absolutely.
It even gets better, Bob. I understand you made the road trip.
Yep. I flew out, and quite a town. And I was really proud to be there and to see those guys again, see that last game.
How about that? Mike, you joined us a little bit late. I'm sure you have a few stories about some of the things you've been hearing, taking notes here. Eddie stories, Van stories. What jumps out at you?
Oh, geez, there's been so many stories. And I mean, I see, Dave's post on Facebook, and reading that stuff brings back a lot of memories. And Charlie and I kept in contact a lot. And so there's just so many stories. I did several podcasts as well. My role with Softball Canada is just a wonderful piece for me right after the King in his court. And I'm spoiled. I get to work in softball still and get paid to do something I love. So, it's one of those things. There's just so many different stories and so many different road trips, and like the talk about getting fired, and then you're back the next day, and you wouldn't give it up for the world. It's just something, and Dave refers to it as Eddie Feiner University, and it's so true. I mean, we used to talk about that all the time. If you live and die by the man, which we all would and did, and it just meant so much. Like, you get in the van in March, and you're through everything, and September comes around, and you got 150 to 200 games underneath your belt, and it's just you've seen so many states, and I didn't get to do too many countries, but I did play in Canada, U.S., Guantanamo Bay, and there's all stories in every little nook and cranny there. And the nice thing is, you don't just get to see the tourist areas. You're seeing where the people grow up, where the people play, where they go eat, where they visit. It's not a tourist. It's not a tourist trip. It's actually you're seeing every nick and corner of every little town. So it's pretty neat how they treat you. I got so many different little stories, and it's all because of Eddie, and that's the bottom line. But a couple do jump out, prison stories, and I shared it on the podcast last time I was on, and it more or less we were in New Jersey, I think it was, and walking into this prison, the guards tell you, okay, guys, here's just a little heads up. We almost canceled this game. There was some unrest in the prison. So what we got is we got some snipers. We brought some extra guys in. They're on top. They're in the, they're in the towers. And if anything happens, just stand still. Don't move. So anyway, okay. So about I think it was the second inning, and you could see that they weren't used to playing fast pitch. They played a little bit of slow pitch and something. And there's just one great big giant of a man, probably about 6'6", 350 or so, and he kind of ran the show at the bench, and he got a little upset whenever the guys were striking out. So he grabbed the bat, he walked out to the batter's box, and I looked at Eddie and I said, "What do I do?" Eddie, he says, "Strike the guy out, like just blow by him." So the first pitch, I forget who was catching, but he basically swung after the ball hit the glove, and he stood up and threw the ball back to me. And I looked at Eddie, and Eddie said, "Throw it again." So I threw it hard again, and strike two. And then Eddie calls time, and he starts walking in, and I'm going, "Okay, what's going on now?" And he says, "Sir, do you play slow pitch?" And of course, the big guy kind of just stared at him. And he turned around, walked back to first base, and he says, "Mike, lob one in, let him hit it." So lobbed one in, and sure enough, he just took this great big cut, but it went about, 20 feet in the air, and I had to move a couple of steps, but I caught it. I looked over, and all of a sudden, the big guy's coming walking to the mound with the bat. And I'm going, uh-oh. So I look over at Hoppy. Actually, it was Hoppy that was catching, so I kind of look over at him. He's just standing back there, kind of mouth wide open, not sure what to do either. And I'm thinking, okay, do I throw the ball at him? Do I turn around and run? What do I do? And then I said, "Oh, yeah." The guard said, "Stand still." So he's walking towards me, and he's got the bat. And I'm going, "Oh, my God, what's going to happen here?" And he gets about 10 feet away, and I'm finally thinking, shoot him, just like, and then all of a sudden, he just sticks out his hand. He goes, "Good pitching, bud." Turns around, walks away, and my heart was pounding, and it was just like, "Okay, here we go." So life on the road.
All right.
Yeah.
Mike,
That was
what's
a neat
the,
story.
do you, been playing some serious ball like you are now, do you really miss the goofy times, the fun times, now that you've got to switch gears and, play a different kind of ball?
Yeah, well, my role is basically I handle the national teams with Softball Canada, so I don't actually get to physically play in the games, but I can tell you this: I still practice with the boys. I still throw batting practice when I can, and as much as you'd like to be out and doing it, still the old body's saying, okay, you just can't maintain that level for so many years being out of it. And it's still a blast. I I got two boys now. They're 16 and 18. They kind of both play very competitive, high level fast pitch. So I'm involved as much as I can with both of them as well. And it's nice whenever I can combine what I do and bring my boys in. So they've been with me to, world championships in New Zealand. They've been with me to national team camps, you name it. So they're kind of, they're spoiled in that regard. But yeah, it's a passion. I still love the game days. It's funny because even whenever I'm not playing, I still have a routine, and everybody that's on this call basically knows you got a routine every morning whenever you get up, what you're going to do that day, and you got to drive. And as soon as you check into the hotel, you have a routine starting there, and it's right through to the end of the game. That's your routine. That's what you're born and bred to do whenever you're playing this game. And I still have that routine on the road. What I do. It's pretty neat. The competitive juices still flow.
Yeah. Les, when you hear these guys talk about how it was and the things that happened, how it evolved, is it amazing to you how the more things change, the more they stay the same?
More or less, Jimbo. Mike, I wanted to ask you, were your boys at the 2015 World Championships in Saskatoon?
They were at the Pan Am Games. So a couple weeks later, we played at the Pan Am Games.
Okay, yeah.
So they came to the Pan Ams in Toronto. They were in Prince Albert in 17, I think it was, for the World Juniors.
Nice.
They were both out with me there. So yeah. And then my oldest was with the U18 team, Team 18 Canada, and he was at the Worlds in New Zealand 2020, just before COVID hit. So
very nice. Just for the fans' sake, the 2015 one, we were down 5-0, eh, Mike? And we came back, and I think it ended up 10-5, was it?
Yeah, right around that. Lex, you're right. It was a Team Canada comeback against New Zealand, 10-5, 10-6, something like that, and it was. Yeah.
3 home runs by our buddy from Newfie, Malali.
Yeah.
And a grand salami to top it off. But
Yep. Lots
great
of great
memory
memories there too.
Some of the greatest ball I ever seen was that weekend. It's so
8,000 people in the stands.
Yeah, it was fabulous. What an effort. When you asked Jim, about then and now,
Yes.
it's fairly similar. Eddie we did things quick back in the day, and you were in and out, triple headers, as Dave and the guys know. I played 74, 75, 76, 81, 82. And of course, when I came back in 81, we had a sponsor, which was Miller. So they paid us to drink their beer. So when Eddie called me, I said, and he mentioned it, I said, well, I'm already packed, Eddie. I had to quit a nice sales job in radio in Red Deer, Alberta, but it was well worth it to go back because the money had got better. And he was still firing bullets. We toured across, the States and Canada, even went to Alaska, played on the pipeline there and some of the military bases. And sometimes it's a grind, but it's a good grind, because you're playing and the camaraderie, meeting the other teams, partying afterwards. With Miller on your side, they really did a nice job sponsoring. They treated us good. At $2,500 every couple of months, they paid us to drink their beer.
Did you get in? There was a Miller commercial, as I recall, back in the day. That the King was on. Were you? I guess you were. Were you on that one, Les?
I wasn't, but I was paid by Miller the following year. That the guy you see there is Floyd Berger, who doesn't get a lot of mention, but he had a couple of years. He was a good athlete in general. Played football for West Virginia, and he was a friend from around where JR was living, and he toured for a couple of years. But he got into commercials, so they got. residuals from that. And Eddie took a buyout. I think it was like about 50 grand.
Wow.
And so we got a lot of recognition from that. The baseball strike was that year in 81. So it didn't debut. It actually debuted on a Canadian comedy show. And so once that debuted and got around, you know, there was a lot more recognition, bigger crowds and more bonuses. And of course, you know, Miller did everything for you, embossed pro golf bags. We had golf bags like Rodney Dangerfield's in Caddyshack. And so all of that was nice to get those perks. They dressed the van up, and you know, we played any town we went to had a Miller brewer. So we were still playing pretty competitively, played some of the Western League teams, and just in general had a great time. There was a better scheduling then too. And when you say Eddie didn't have, you know, people working for him, booking, as Bob said, he worked out of a briefcase. Sometimes you'd start the tour in the spring, he would be still filling in games. So he was amazing that he did it all.
Sure. Hey, Coach Dobbins, you
Sure.
guys talking for the sake of our younger fans who may not understand the challenge that you had. Right now, you're coaching serious ball, but back in the day, not only did you have to win games with the four-man king in his court, but you had to put on a show. Could you tell some of the fans about the fun doing that?
Well, and then I think the best way to explain it is because every now and then people would, I mean, it was definitely a routine that went through the 5 innings or 6 innings, whatever we played. And as Eddie once said, you wouldn't change Hamlet. So, you know, so what we kind of did every night. But I mean, but to that crowd, it was special to them, and it was something that was going to happen. Like, I mean, the first pitch was always, as a catcher, I'd get in real tight, and I'd tell the umpire, just, you know, get right against me. Tell the batter, I just take this pitch, and as soon as it hit my glove, I just fly backwards into the umpire, and then we'd just go sprawling, and which the crowd would be like, "What just happened?" And then I'd get up, and it was basically would go and like, "Hey, what pitch was that?" I said, "Oh, that was Mike's Linda Ronstadt pitch." Linda Ronstadt pitch? What's that? It blew by you. Every night, hold it out there, right, Dave? But
That was a goodie.
And I think that those are the parts right there that people remember. I think part of it too is there was always 1 or 2 people we kind of picked on, or not picked on. They just became part of the show. But that's the things they remember after it's gone, and say, "Yeah, they struck me out holding the bat out like this," or some of the little skits that we would do. I think something that's unique. Okay, so and on Google you can track a series of words, and I track the words "king in his court," and it basically sends me a notice anywhere in the world where the term "king in his court" is basically in published in the newspaper or whatever. It sends me the article. I can go back and research it. But the interesting thing, 50% of them are obituaries, and it's gentlemen that played against the court in their lifetime. Okay, but it was so much a part of their life, that's part of their obituary. Unfortunately, they passed away or like that. And so some of them are interesting to read because some of them are from Canada, all over the States. But that's just the impact that Eddie had on people. And it was in those kind of situations there. I mean, that was entertainment back in the day. You know, unfortunately, you know, today's the entertainment is, you know, video games like that, but it was going to the ballpark. And I think Eddie made a great living by every 2 years he'd come back through, okay, and you know, basically the little town and wherever like that, or the big stadiums like that. But it was always something that was welcome, and it was always something that was enjoyed and appreciated, I think, from the people's point of view.
Well, Charlie, that was the Henston term, barnstorming. You know, town to town, and whether you played in front of 7 people or 7,000, you know, it was a show. You put on a show. You got to tell that one bit. The king pitch blindfolded. A lot of folks may or may not believe that, but he did. Mm-hmm. And one bit you told me where a fella got hit on the head. You feel like
that was the last year with Ron. That was down in Florida. Okay, we're playing at, was it not Flagler, but at Stetson. Okay, you remember going in there and well, at the time we come in and we're playing on the baseball field, and the baseball coach is there, and it's packed. You can't get another seat in the house. And I'm talking to him. He says he's looked upset. I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "I'm the number 15 team in the country, and I can't get 100 people here, and y'all come through and y'all pack the house." I was like, "Oh, sorry, okay." But so what basically was happening? Hoppy was pitching, blindfold, was doing the trick. Had a guy up, had his helmet on. Okay, so and basically, I mean, it's literally hey, here you go, Hop, here you go, here's the glove, and basically it was a curveball. He threw it, and it was kind of tight in the inside, the right-handed batter in that inside slot, and it coming right back to me. Well, the guy freaked out, and he ran toward the plate, and it hit him in the head, and trickled out there, and I just grabbed the ball, and I think, was it Horowitz that was with us? I can't remember who else was with us, Ron, but and maybe you, Mike. Were you there in that game? Yeah, it was you. I don't remember. Anyway, it trickled out, and I just grabbed it, fired it to first, and I just looked at him and I said, "Hey, nice bunt, but where we come from, we use the bat." Okay, and just rolled on. Everybody thought it was part of the show.
Sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was something for me, and thinking about that game, but something that Hoppy told me, and getting me introduced quickly on the road, is no matter what happens, it was on purpose, and that's just the way it went. Whether it was that kind of ball that went into somebody's head or a fly ball that was dropped, it's whatever happened, you did that on purpose, and that was part of the mystique of, man, they did that, or when the bat's out there across the plate, every now and then he'd hit the bat. That was on purpose. Or throw it past him. And that's the way you played it. And so the game led to a lot of different things, and there was not every play got put into that game because the option wasn't there. But the hand it was
spontaneity, Ron?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, the spontaneous from what happens on the field to bring in another play is amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And I think too, what was the thing for me, you got to be an athlete every game. You got to do whatever you could do every game, whether that was pitching, hitting, playing defense. That was all what everybody on the court wanted and lived for. All the other stuff was wonderful too, but what you lived for as a member of the court was to play those games. It's whenever you didn't have any games or there was rainouts or whatever, that's whenever things were long and treacherous. But you got to be an athlete every night. That's one thing I'll always remember.
All of you are passionate about your king in the court days, all the things you've done in your life. It's so special, but I got to tell you, there's one guy here in this crew who still talks about the memories and feels them and writes about them like they were yesterday. And you know who that is. That's our big guy from Lemoyne, Pennsylvania. Dave, you want to talk about some of your passion and you're over a decade after the Army playing with the King?
I just wanted to say that we got paid to entertain a crowd, but our job technically was to make the team we played the stars of their own town. And we did that by calling some of those guys names, like a fat catcher we called Pork Chops, or a small guy we called Smurf, or the first runner that they get on first base, he gets picked off behind the back, and his picture is always in the paper tomorrow morning. That makes those guys stars in their town for the rest of their lives. We leave and go to a next town tomorrow. They have to stay there. So if we made those guys the stars for one evening, we did our job. And I used to get a big kick out of that. But I wanted to say, as I'm looking at all these faces right here, it makes me feel good. I swell up a little bit. Eddie Feiner was a Depression era genius. He created a format that was so brilliant, never seen before, set the softball world on its ear like it's never been set on its ear before. And took us guys around the world once or twice and back again. It's a dream come true for all of us. And as I listen to each one of these guys talking now, 15 years removed from the scene of the crime, you know, the respect level is just so great for the journey that it just makes me feel so good. And we owe it all to the king. I mean, the king, he had a presence like no other. I mean, there he was, night after night, under the glow of the lights, bulging right arm, red, white, and blue uniform, red, white, and blue glove, famous crew cut, giving the patrons something they've never seen before and never see again. He was a true workhorse. Oh boy, I tell you, I run out of adjectives to describe this guy. He's just somebody that changed our lives in such a dramatic way that we're all better people for it today. And I sense that, and I can hear it in all their voices right now. It makes me feel good. Just the respect level for the chance to breathe that rarefied air that Eddie created. I mean, it's awesome.
Dave, one thing you mentioned brought a memory back to me. Who wants to take this one? Not only did you change your lives and you remember it forever, but Eddie started a thing where the king and his court played a lot of charity games and you gave back to the communities you played in. Who wants to take that one and tell the fans a little bit how that one worked?
That was really fulfilling, rewarding to be able to make a difference in someone, a child or an adult or a town or an association, you know, with coming and doing our thing. And you seem to play better, feel better when you were helping. At least I did, and I know some of the other guys did too. And yeah, everybody knows Eddie was a religious guy, and God bless him for that. His favorite hymn was what was that hymn? The Old Rugged Cross. And so when he did charity games, and including the military games too, he was very special and more or less dedicated to that type of thing.
There's you mentioned Eddie's religious connection. Ron, you had a very special connection with Rich Hoppy. I wonder if you would mind sharing that a little bit with the spiritual connection you had with Rich.
Yeah. So, you know, I placed my faith in Jesus Christ in 2001. And I've been a fairly new believer for a little while. And I say that just because I hadn't really had those roots set in until a couple of teammates of mine with the Blue Jays system, you know, discipled me along. But, you know, when I was with the court that final year, especially when we had the van or a rental van, it wasn't one of the original. And just riding around, Charlie and myself and Mike was in there, and then John, a couple other guys throughout that last year. But Hoppy and I would have those conversations. You know, he really kind of took me under his wing a little bit, just to bring me back home, get a little more solid grounding in that, talking about where, you know, we were on the road and Hoppy's, you know, not got that consistent meeting that he would need and want and talk about openly about that. And, you know, so being able to be there for him and have that conversation with him, not knowing much about AA myself, I never experienced in that, but just being there for him, you know, having a Bible study here and there, just whether it's just a conversation or a full-on study, but, you know, being able to hold each other accountable. You know, playing in the minors, it was tough to resist a lot of things that comes with being on the road. And I'm sure the court was the same way, many, many years. But not that we run into much of that final year, but just having that accountability partner and just being able to lean on each other, being away from home. You know, I was married in 2010. And so that final year was 2011. I'm, you know, 1 year married and away from my wife for, you know, basically an entire summer, give or take, and, you know, him the same. And so just the toll that it would take on a family, you know, I know Dave would be able to speak a lot more on that, and Mr. Barber about just, you know, you're gone from March till October, and what it takes to have some kind of grounded life. Hoppy, he was very special to me. He meant a lot to me. Obviously I never got to see Eddie play live. But being able to have him, mentor me that last year was, and hearing his speech, hearing his testimony, basically after each game, and what it meant to him and how it carried him, it was pretty special for sure. That was probably something I took more than probably anything else, than just that and the history of making that final year special.
Thanks, Ron. If you mind to indulge me, I have one interesting Hoppy adventure that I think the fans might enjoy. I wrote a book years ago called Undefeated, Untied, Unscored Upon, strictly a sports book where my father's team won every game and nobody scored a point against them in football, American football. That is, Bob, excuse me. But anyway, Charlie got me hooked up with Rich, and we were going to do a softball book about the king and his court. Well, those of you who've read the Tales of the Last Barnstormer, you realize it's probably more 70% spiritual adventures and 30% softball. Rich took you down avenues when you traveled with the king where he touched people and you had no idea. Charlie and Dave, you remember a lot about this as well, but the unexpected turns that you took in the road, traveling with the king and his court, pretty amazing, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I know
Go ahead,
Mike was involved in a lot of that also, for sure. With Hoppy was just an amazing human being. Okay. And besides being an unbelievable entertainer and obviously his athletic prowess is unquestioned right there. I mean, he could duplicate everything that the king could do. But he had the showman like ways to, he just could capture a crowd. That was so amazing.
Eddie Feiner, he touched people with his presence, with his softball wizardry, and our show in general. And it's hard to calculate how you touch somebody or how deeply you touch somebody for the short term or for the long term. We don't know that, but we do know that he touched people. But Rich Hoppy is one particular case, concrete evidence that Eddie Feiner touched him for the long haul. He saw Eddie perform when he was only 11-year-old boy, and it hit him so hard that he went back to his home in Bayonne, New Jersey, and learned how to become the king. It took him 15, 20 years to master it, but he made up his mind he was going to be the king because of what he saw. It just took him so hard that he had to do it. And he became the king. He went out on the road with Eddie starting in 1964. He pitched against him a few times, then he went out on the road with him and pitched for Eddie off and on down through the years. And then at some point, when Eddie couldn't pitch hardly anymore because of age and everything, Hoppy actually took over the show. And he was the king because he could duplicate, like Charlie said, everything Eddie could do, between the legs, blindfolded, behind the back. So Eddie Feiner and the king and his court, when they go into these little towns and perform and sprinkle stardust on these people, no one even knows how hard we touched somebody. Rich Hoppy is just one particular case where we know that we did touch people. And I know Hoppy's not on the Zoomcast here tonight, but like Charlie said, what a class act. I spent a lot of years with him. In fact, I played with a lot of guys on the king and his court, a lot of great boys. But I spent the most years with Rich Hoppy. And he turned me around. He's a big brother. He turned me around. He's a street smart guy. Has a degree in psychology. He's a business smart. He's a war veteran, and he has a vocabulary that unbelievable. So when you roll that all into one, you've got quite a character. Not to mention a great show pitcher.
No doubt. And it wouldn't be fair, Charlie, right? To mention Hoppy without saying the words Ron and I talked about the other night. We are all connected. That's one of Hoppy's phrases. And it's so true that all these fans who are watching, they'll find some connection to somehow, like Ron's talking about his father playing against the King. Folks will watch this show and say, wait a minute, I remember my brother, my father, my uncle telling me about the King and his court. But Hoppy meant we're all connected in more than a softball way. We're connected spiritually as well.
I want to show you something, and this has been for 20 years, but I don't know if you can, it's basically it's backwards, obviously, but it's the King and Ions logo, and if you can see Rich's moniker, if you had a team, could I be on it? And it really has nothing to do with the athletic side, but it's basically, can you and I be together in that part of it and understand each other?
Yeah.
I think that's something we especially need now in our days where we're dealing with such
That's a fact, Charlie.
different systems going on and different questions within our lives. But Hop, special guy.
Well, Hoppy, I guess he modeled his life, after the Lord when he had a transformation in 1989. But Eddie Feiner had that same gift. And a lot of us as kids, I saw him when I was 11 years old in 1964. But I believe, Bob, didn't you mention you had a similar story that you saw the King play up in Nova Scotia and it changed your life?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was in a small town called Trenton, Nova Scotia. And he was late coming to the game. It was probably 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And it was like, I was thinking, why are we still here, Dad? Why are we still here? And then this man gets out on the field and, there's a guy throwing 3 balls, Al Jackson throwing 3 balls to the guys. And it's just like, okay. And the next thing you know, Eddie's pitching from right field into the catcher, and the catcher can't get it out there. And it's like, okay. And then on came the show, and it started me in ball. I mean, in my small town of 20,000 people, there were 30 softball teams. There were 5 leagues, and my dad played, and I watched it. But seeing him that night, it was like, holy crap, this is something else. And in 1977, he could still bring her, and he was playing a senior A team from our area, which was the Tops, and they beat them. I can still remember it. And nobody sat down. Once they went out on the field, everybody stood the entire game. And it just got me hooked on softball, and basically was my whole life. And I'll never forget it. And we've been talking a lot about the small towns and the people that he impacted. But it's not only just, the small towns. I think of being out there in some of the, what I would call celebrities that came out to see Eddie. We were in small town, so Bill Russell from the Celtics was there, come over to see Eddie Feiner. Boog Powell, we were in Baltimore. He come over to see Eddie Feiner. I think, Mike, you could talk about Gordie Howe, and there's probably 1,000 stories. He had an impact on those people too. I mean, he was one of them. He rubbed his shoulders with the best of the business in other businesses, and but was the king to all of those in the small towns too. So it's just an amazing story, and yeah, we are all connected in our various ways. And I think if one person told a story, there would be 6 or 7 more exactly like it. It seems to be 11 years old was the time when we all saw Eddie, and it's just kind of neat.
Well, Dave, you got the chance to play golf with Ted Williams with Eddie. I mean, once you talk about that, that was a pretty unique thing. Am I right? I think that's correct.
Yeah, that's kind of a cute story. We were in Florida, down in the Crystal River area. And actually, we had a short drive. Can you believe it? So we had a free day. So the King said, why don't you guys golf? There's a great course over here called Black Diamond. So Eddie didn't play. He had work to do. So we went over to Black Diamond, pulled up on the property, and they had a guard shack down there. And the guard guy was dressed up like Smokey the Bear with the big drill sergeant cap on. And I said, hey, we're the famous 4-man team. We'd like to play your course today. And he just kept shaking his head like, no way, buddy, no way. And I said, look, we're not looking for a freebie here. We'll pay our way. He said, no, you can't get on here. So I knew that Ted Williams lived in the area. So jokingly, before we left, I said, how about if we come back with Ted Williams tomorrow? Can we play? And he said, yeah, right. So anyway, we went back and told Eddie about how we got shot down. And Eddie got upset right away because he doesn't like anybody taking shots at the king in his court. So he says, I'll call Ted. So he called Ted. They're old buddies from years ago. They did a bunch of charity work for the Jimmy Fund in Boston. And Ted answers the phone. And Eddie tells him the story, how we got shot down by the guard and all that stuff. Long story short, Eddie says, well, can we get on your course? Can you get us on tomorrow? And if you can, why don't you play with us? Ted says, call you back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, the phone rings. It's Ted. How about 10 o'clock tomorrow? And I'm playing with you. So the next day, we pull up the guard shack, and the same guard is on duty. And now I have the king with me. And I said, 10 o'clock tea time with Ted Williams. Can you direct me? And he went to start pointing and everything, and we just pulled off. He was embarrassed. He had that funny look on his face as soon as we pulled up. But anyway, we played 18 holes with Ted Williams, and it was a spectacular thrill. You can only imagine playing with the Splendid Splinter, the greatest hitter. And one more little funny story about this. The king says, whatever you do, let the man alone. No photos, no questions, no autographs. Let's just enjoy the day. So we get out there 4 holes into it, and about the 4th hole is the signature hole in the course. And Ted says, don't tell me you guys didn't bring no cameras. Boy, them cameras come out of those bags so fast. Even Eddie pulled his camera out. But that was a treat for all times to play with Ted Williams.
Nice. Great story, Dave. I seen those pictures, man. That was fabulous.
Well, you know, when we got to the turn, we were coming off 9, getting ready to go to 10, and Jim Cott, the baseball pitcher, had a foursome, and he was going out to 1. And when he saw Ted, he went berserk. He goes, Ted, I want you to meet my people. So we took pictures with Jim Cott and all that stuff, and he got to meet Ted Williams and Eddie Feigner all in the same stroke. So it was quite an interesting day. But that kind of stuff happens when you least expect it, and it can happen anywhere. We met Ernie Banks, all kind of guys, just like Bob was saying. And Morris, PA. We go to Morris, PA. It's a little town. I don't know how many people they have. And John Stupper, who pitched for the St. Louis Cardinals, came out. And you could tell stories like that from now till cows come home. They're everywhere.
Well, we got at least one more. Charlie, you told a couple of stories about, was it Icky?
Oh, well, that was Bob's first game. Okay, and so we picked him up at the airport, and we're playing at the University of Dayton. And we're playing on their football field, and we actually had it set up where we were doing the King of Diamonds thing before, where it was we had the tarps out where the kids were signing them, and I mean a lot of fun. But so we heard basically they had a Icky Woods, who was the running back for Cincinnati, right? Okay, so the Icky Shuffle back in the early '90s or in that range there. Mike, you were there at that game, okay? So so we're going through it, and we hear that he charged an appearance fee of like $500 or whatever to come out and play in it. And this is a charity thing for like the local Boys and Girls Club or something like that. Well, anyway, so we're going through the line early, introducing him. So Hoppy's right in front of me, and so this is Icky Woods, and he grabbed his hand and he jerked it away, and he's like, and he just looked at me and he goes, Icky Woods. He looked at me and says, you told me Kerry Woods was here, and just kept walking. I'm like, and I wasn't prepared for it. I was like, and I'm like, what's up, bud? And just kind of rolled through. But that was just kind of spontaneous like that. But that was Bob's first game. So and the funny part was, so Hop's pitching, Mike was catching, Bob was playing first. Okay, Eddie was on the microphone. I was playing shortstop. Well, Rich threw a pitch. Icky Woods just stuck the bat out and the line drive to right field. And so I just take off. I mean, you remember, we're on a football field, and there's a track, and there's a cement wall. Okay, so I take off, and the ball, boom, skips, hits it, comes bouncing back to me, and he's motoring, and I take it. Mike's sitting at home plate like this, and it's an easy like 100-yard throw. I mean, 100-foot throw like that. Boom, bullet right to Mike, and Mike catches it, and he's like, "Come here." Okay, tags him out. Okay. Well, the next day in the paper, it was like, yeah, 300-foot throw gets Ickey Woods at the plate. I'm like, well, there you
Like
go.
a bullet.
Yeah, like a bullet. It was, I mean, but that was just, there's the paper again, like that. But that was my Ickey Woods story, like that.
Oh, let's move on to an interesting story for the fans. It's one thing to be around celebrities, but most people in life have been fired. But I don't think as many people have been fired in life as been fired by the king. So let's start with Dave. Dave, what's it like to be fired by the king?
It's an experience, I can tell you that. There's different degrees of being fired from Eddie. You know, you can get fired from Eddie and go have a sandwich and come back and you're reinstated. It's not that bad. But then there are the worst kinds where you actually get sent home. And that actually happened to me twice. He fired me and sent me home. And on my way home, I wished I wasn't going home. I wished I was back out there. And then there were 3 other occasions where I actually quit and went home. And then he brought me back. But he has a revolving door out there, Eddie did. You know, the road is hard. And tempers flare over all kinds of stuff because you're out there away from home and all kind of stuff goes wrong. And you get irritable, the heat and everything wears you out, and you argue over whatever. And if you just hit him the wrong way, you got yourself a ticket on a gray dog heading home. And everyone has experienced that, some more than others. Me and Hoppy were in his doghouse plenty of times because we challenged him, but it's I think everybody has a firing on their shirt sleeve somewhere along the line. How about you, Les?
Yeah, it was no exception. I used to have to pick up the pieces when Eddie fired the great Gary West, which I think he led the league in firings. But another thing I wanted to say is God bless Gary. He's having a hard time with his health and needs a bit of mention there, the greatest sports comedian ever. So, yeah, the time I got fired was in Boston. And Eddie says, get your glove. We're going downtown. And I said, sure. Anything else I need? No, just come on down. So we were meeting some media, taking pictures and everything. Beautiful. You know, we're hanging out. We had a couple of days around Boston. And he was going to get the media to hit. And I was just a young guy, maybe 26, 27. And he says, yeah, you're going to catch them. I said, well, you didn't, ask me to bring a mask or a can. And he was still throwing BBs back then. So I said, geez, you didn't tell me that, Eddie. I'm glad to do anything you need, but I don't want any foul tips, wrecking my future. And so right on the spot, he fired me right in front of the media. So there I am downtown Boston. On my own, I walked away and walked right by Fenway Park. I said, oh, this is Fenway. So I took a good gander at Fenway and then grabbed a cab back to the hotel. And I was sitting with Jackson and West. And Eddie walked in a while later. And he said, you guys go get ready for tonight. So he unfired me.
Unfired.
Right on the same spot.
Well, I guess the only one, that's a good one. That's a good one, Les. I guess the only guy here never fired was Ron Davenport because the king wasn't, God rest his soul, the king passed in 2007, as I recall. And Ron, you guess you've never were fired by the king, but in spirit, you probably were.
Yeah. Yeah. Hoppy give me a half talking to a couple of times. If I missed a bunt or something like that, he did everything he could not to fuss me out right in front of everybody. He waited till we got to the hotel. So he passed the torch on to Hoppy for that piece as well.
Some young reporter made a mistake somewhere out in the West, I believe, of calling Hoppy the new king. And Rich told him there's only one king. He said, and that's Eddie Feiner. He said, I'm the pitcher. I'm not the king. But before we close out, I just want to tell the fans what a rare treat to have 6 former King of the Court players here and give you a rare glimpse behind the scene, behind the bus, you know, what it's like to play, what it's like to be on the road. But I'm sure I missed about 5 or 6 good stories. But let's go around the horn one more time just to see if we can pick up something that's on your mind that we missed. Let's, Dave, you want to lead off again?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that getting back to Eddie Feiner was he was a true sweetheart when you really got down to it, and he had a tough job. He spent his whole life on the road, 6 months, 7 months a year on the road for 60 years. That can callous you up a little bit. And he had 3 other players to take care of. And I'll speak when Hoppy and I were on the road, you know, we were good troops, but we gave him fits. So, you know, when he grabbed a hold of us and shook us a couple of times and even fired us once or twice, you know, he was probably doing his job. And in Eddie's defense, I love the man. He changed my life. He's the 8th wonder of the world. And we're buddies. I mean, we're buddies. He took me around the world and back again more than once. I loved the guy. We had a lot of great times together. I used to go to California a month before the tour even started and help him get the press kits out and do all kinds of leg work to get the court up and running for that upcoming season. And during that time, we really got close. But once we put the uniform on for the first game, he'd scream at me just like anybody else because this is where the rubber meets the road. But without hogging all the time, I just want to say that, you know, Eddie Feiner was, without a doubt, the greatest legend there ever was. And I'm glad to be his friend and be part of his group. And he changed my life forever.
As he did many folks that even saw him play, but to play for him must have been quite the honor. You know, just to be an honorary member of the King. I'm touched by all your stories.
No, I enjoyed my years with Eddie. We played hard and we, you know, partied hard and really enjoyed the experience. Wanted to say to the Fastpitch zone people that it's a privilege to be able to speak to you. And I wanted to thank the ladies, Crystal, and is it Jessie?
Yes.
For lining this up and getting a hold of us and, you know, recapping a lot of the old stories. But one quick story about Eddie before we go was my first year where I was learning and more or less the rookie at 26, I guess. We were playing in Colorado, and I'll make it quick. In the blindfold inning was the 7th back then. And we had 2 out and a pesky batter that must have fouled off about half a dozen pitches. And, you know, we're in late September. Eddie's tired. He looked at the guy, took the mask off and looked, wound up and did a bunch of whirligig stuff, come behind the back. And this is blindfolded with a changeup. And the guy actually swung twice at it. And the fans come right out of their seat. And so I was waiting for that changeup to drop into my glove, and it was like a standing ovation. He fooled me, but I caught it.
I love it.
Gotta. Mike, you've really played. You've brought a lot to the game, and we sure appreciate you joining us. Better late than never. But like in true King and Court fashion, why be on time, right?
Well, the ironic part is I got a minor hockey meeting that started about 20 minutes ago that I'm trying to do on my iPad as well. So I love this stuff. You know, it's great to see some familiar faces and hear those voices again. And you know, I go back to the guys that I played with. You know, right from the beginning. I mean, Gary West and Dave were my first game back in '93. And I mean, that's one of the only times I got to throw to Dave. And it just happened to be my first game was the same time they were doing NBC Now. And so, I mean, my first warm-up pitches where there's a camera like 3-4 feet away from Dave's glove. And I'm just thinking, there's 1,000 people there. It's about a half hour from my hometown, and I'm going, what am I doing? Like, I'm just like, here, I play this game. I've played it for many years, but this is totally different. This is something that, my dad's there, and he played a lot of softball himself, and it was just almost surreal just being there. And then I got to play about 5 more games that season till they headed back west. And then the first letter from Eddie came about a month later, and everybody got those typewritten letters, and a bunch of errors and things, and correct them tape. And I still have all those letters here. And then the phone call saying, hey, we want you to tour full time next year, can you do it? And it was like, well, give me a couple of days, but it was really, give me 2 minutes, Eddie. I just got to make sure I can finish off what I had to do here at I can leave tomorrow if you want. It was so exciting to do that, and flying into right into California in March, and just picking up pretty much where we left off. And then being with Gary and Jack that season. And then Rich came back the following year, and I mean, it's just and then you meet the good people like Charlie whenever we were in that area. And then as obviously as Bob popped in Indianapolis. And there's just great memories and great friendships created throughout all this. And I still met a lot of coaches and players who I still keep in contact. So it's just one of those networking opportunities where it's just for the love of this game. And I think that's what I take out of it.
Well, thanks, Mike, and
Mike.
again for making the time for us. We'll jump from you up over Canada to your neighbor to the northeast, Bob, up in Nova Scotia. You want to?
Just got to think about that northeast. Okay, at least east.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. No, it's. I think the thing that really sticks with me is even in Eddie's later days, people were still expecting Eddie Feigner out on the field, and when they wasn't, that didn't seem to bother them. It was, God, this man is still here. And, they wanted his autograph. They wanted to shake his hand. They wanted to tell their story. And it really didn't seem to matter, what his health was. It was paying homage to him, what he had done for so many years. And I can remember hearing him say, he was the only one that really made any money playing softball like that. And he's probably right. I mean, he outlived, all of the other touring teams, and they were all very good in their own right. I know Les has played for another one of them, but he did it for so long, and just the respect that he earned. I remember being in Tennessee, and Dot Richardson, U.S. Olympian, coming over and spending time with him because, he had paved the way for softball for so many people. And it was like that, town after town and city after city. And, we hear today, he gave us our start. You see him and played. I bet there's tens of thousands of 11-year-old boys who saw him and just wanted to do it. And we were one of the lucky ones. And I remember when the guys that I played ball with found out where I was, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't even tell my dad because I didn't want, was just private till I got there. And they were just in awe. And the fact that I was able to go back for so many years after that, it was an experience that I'll never forget. And it's, it's right up there with one of the top things I've ever done in my life. And so hail the king.
Long live the king.
Yep.
Yeah, Bob, thank you. Now, if I got my directions right, we're going to move down south to Virginia before Charlie closes us out. Ron, all yours.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, have never seen in person Eddie pitch. Obviously, I always feel like a student of the game, and I've watched all the videos that are out there, and especially the year I actually got to play and was able to just anything on YouTube. I just want to learn as much as I could. just to know that history and know when you interact with others that had seen him before. You know, we're up in New York playing in Oswego, and you got a son, well, a granddad, a dad, and a son that had all, you know, the granddad had played against Eddie, the dad had probably played against Eddie as well, and just had that story, that generational, and they were trying to pass it along to their son. It was just so neat, and it didn't happen just once. It happened just about every town that we went in. And to hear those stories, to hear Hoppy being able to share story after story, and just life on the road with Eddie, life on the road with Dave, and just all the good things that he had to say about, you know, just about anybody that was on the team. Being involved with Mike, I know he just headed out, but and Charlie that last year, it was neat for me as a big just relationship type guy to be able to be in that car, in that van, on the road with each other. Yeah, last couple of years selling merchandise, you know, whatever we can to just scrap by, but to know the stories that were there. Yeah. And just the road that was paved, we got to meet. One of the things that was so neat for me, hearing my dad talk about, you know, I think he was 1967 when they played in Fort Huachuca, but it was, you know, Meade Kinzer was at our final game in Walla Walla, Washington. He came out with his family, but probably the neatest one experience that I had was it Al Charlie? Was it Al Jackson?
Al Jackson, yeah.
So Al Jackson,
that was in
kind of
Bristol,
out of
Rhode Island.
nowhere, showed up at a game on the road. And I'm
Beautiful.
sure Hoppy knew, and Charlie probably knew as well. But you know, I knew the name just from studying the history of it. But he comes out, he's probably in his late 70s, maybe early 80s, with his jersey, his original jersey. You know, somebody that spent 20 years on the road, and just
Remember he
being able
got
to
the
talk.
base hit?
And then out of nowhere, he's like, "How about I get an at bat?"
Yeah.
And everybody's like, "Yeah, absolutely."
Yeah.
So he gets out there and gets to the bat, and we got a girl on the mound. She's throwing it pretty good. I mean, nothing special or not special. She's you know, a very strong pitcher. He goes up there, and I think it's the first pitch, but it's either the first or the second pitch, and he laces a line drive right up the middle, 80-year-old, and just jogs at first base just as easy as walks off. You never
So we
lose
need a pinch runner.
It's just awesome just to hear those type of stories.
Yeah.
And to see that history continue to happen right in front of
Sure.
your face.
Well, thanks, Ron. It's something to hear that one. Wasn't Mike also at the last game? Mike Melicky?
Yes, he was too. Yep.
It might not have been me. And yeah, it might not. I might have got the wrong one. Mike Milliken.
Mike Malicky?
Yeah. Oh, no big. No,
Yeah.
throwing it up to before we kick it to Charlie. You know, you all brought a lot to the game, and you taught the fans so much, and not only the charity, but what you gave of yourself, the parts of your life that you don't get back. But I guess you received more from the fans than you really gave. It probably was one of those experiences that you just can't compare, or fans can't really understand. But thanks so much for sharing it all. And Charlie, as a coach, you're still paying it forward, similar to what Ron's doing. I mean, you're only, it's not boys, it's girls now. It's girls fast pitch. So before you close it out, what did you want to share about the King that,
Well, I wanted to mention a couple of folks. Okay, one person we hadn't talked about tonight was Jack Knight, who was a 20-year veteran of the court like that. And Jack was unique. I mean, he's from Massachusetts, but played at the University of Massachusetts, a pentathlon champion, right, Dave? That's
Yes.
Yeah, like that.
Yes.
And but also an actor in Hollywood. He was in Rosemary's Baby. He was in the movie Catch Me If You Can. He was on the original cast of Cheers. I mean, just some really unique stuff there. But also a world-class, fast pitch player, and one of the funniest guys and one of those talented guys I ever met. I saw him one time. This was at, we were at the casino in Connecticut at Foxwoods, and there was a guy playing the piano. We were like on this 8th floor. Next thing, he kicks him off, and he just starts on it, and he's just rolling. And Michael Jordan's kids were in there running around. So we're like, what is going on? Jack's just singing to them. It's having a big time like that. It was an amazing day like that. But I mean, that's just some of the unique things that happen with it right there. I mean, I think, you mentioned, the crossover between the men's game to the women's game. And I think one of the most unique games, and Ron, you can comment on this, is when we played the Bandits. Okay. And so Brandon Duncan was touring with us then. He was also pitching with, that was the forwards with Rich. And so before the game, it was my task to go over and kind of talk to the team we were playing that, hey, for us to do some of the comedy, you got to help us out. Like we tell you to take a lead, take a lead. If we tell you to take a pitch, da da da. And so I'm going through it. Now this is a who's who of the Bandits, or Derek Brown's their head coach, a good friend. And so at the very end, I'm like, all right, everybody understand? They're like, yeah, are there any questions? And then out of the back comes, so let me get this straight. And it's Monica Abbott. And so I'm like, yeah, Monica, what's up? And she's like, so she points at me and says, so you four, and then she goes, old guys, so you're going to play us in a game. I said, there's going to be a game.
Just don't bunt.
Yes. Well, she basically told me, we're going to kick your you-know-what. I said, well, we've had it kicked before, so let's see what happens. So, and now Hop always led off. So he gets up left-handed, and here's Monica, and it's down, and Rich gets up there, and he's shaking his knees and like this, and she comes at him full-blown, boom, there it comes, and Rich, behind his back, boom, all the way around bat, hits the ball, goes straight down, okay, catcher grabs it. I'm coaching first base. So as soon as it goes down, boom, I'm like, she comes up, she fires it. Well, I hit the first base right before the first baseman caught it. And the umpire goes, safe, designated runner. And so I'm standing at first, and I looked at Monica. She's like serious. All of a sudden, a big smile got on her face. She's like, "Oh, that's pretty funny," like that. But that was a fun game. Ron got to face some pretty good pitching right there. Get challenged by, we had Moet there and Juarez and Abbott. So you were seeing some of the best in the ladies' game to take some cuts like that. But that's just one of the memories how it crossed over, and I thought was very, very unique. I mentioned before, hey guys. So I met Dave in like 1989, I think, and it was in little Northeast Connecticut, in Danielson, Connecticut, and it was a benefit for a local Little League. So come in there, and I'm pitching against him, and no, it wasn't 89, it was 91. It's when Glenn was touring with you. And so boom, it's like the third inning, he comes back, and I come inside, and I hit him like really hard right in the arm, and he just kind of flexes it and flips the bat and trots down to first. And of course, well, Glenn and all of them, they are on me like, oh, I wouldn't have done that, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, oops, sorry. But like the saying says, we get the bat every inning. So sure enough, the next inning he comes up. And so fastball outside corner. Well, the Little League Park, and then about 100 yards past that was a chicken coop with live chickens in it. And it hit it. And birds are flying everywhere. And he's kind of just wandering around the bases laughing, going like, but that was my first time I got to meet Mr. Booth like that. And we laugh about it a lot like that, but it was great. But I think the biggest thing I wanted to talk about is it's been 10 years since we closed the court down. Those last two games in Wenatchee and Walla Walla were amazing. And it really took, the folks back. We had some great experiences those final years, playing in a little town, Lee, Nebraska, which is population about 200. And we roll in there, and you get your hotel room, and they only had 4 rooms, so we sold the place out, okay, which is hilarious. We go to the county fair the night before, and we're kind of watching the animals, and then they're playing around. Rich is throwing to try to knock the Cupid dolls off the thing, but we show up the next night, and it was like going back in time. I mean, it was a little wooden covered backstop. And there was a Fastpitch tournament going on, but there was, what do you think, Ron? Maybe 1,000 people, 1,200 people there. It was like, and it was just magic again. And that was what just happened on a nightly basis there like that. Ron and I got to be a parade up in the Iron Country up in northern Wisconsin. I mean, that was just some of the fun, crazy things we did. But where we've gone now is the website is still up, but it's now the King and His Court Historical Preservation Society, and it's a 501c nonprofit. And what we're doing is working on raising money to put a museum in Walla Walla And we've been collecting memorabilia from fans and players. And so it's still in its infant stages. Unfortunately, COVID slowed us down a lot, but it's still something that's very actively going on. And I'm really happy to say, the gentleman that now controls the King and his court, a gentleman named Steve Beeden, has done a really good job of putting a kind of a board together to help make this work. And there's some active conversations going on about putting together a documentary, possibly a movie, or even a streaming series. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities hopefully coming forward. I think it would be really unique to go back and play a season in 1946 and some of the challenge they had, and how if they could duplicate that. And I think it would be some interest to some of the the TV fans and the people, that kind of thing. So we'll see how that goes. But encourage you to go check it out, kingandhiscourt.com. Okay, you can get yourself a jersey. Okay, they're selling them online now, so that's something unique, part of memorabilia. But
What about a hat, Charlie? One of your hats?
well, there you go. There's a hat right there on the back. So same thing. So those are available.
And one more
And
thing.
also get Rich's book. Okay, and like I said, I think Rich has got a lot more stories on there. So I would definitely recommend picking up a copy of that also.
Thanks, Charlie. And I want to thank each and every one of you. You're all special people, and this was a real special evening for the fans. And one final comment. Dave, you served in the military. I served 23 years, played ball all over the world, over 20 surgeries, but I don't regret 1 minute of playing ball. But one thing I want to do is do a shout out to, we got fans all over the world watching this broadcast. So we've got Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, maybe even the Space Force. And I just hope they enjoyed the military connection, because as you all talked about Eddie and the original four guys that he got with him were all Marines and Army. So, and you all have played on military bases. So we sure appreciate and respect all you do for us out in the military. So stay tuned to the Fast Pitch Zone. More to come.